The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated.
I'd like to welcome everyone back to the Nova Society. I'm your host, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, and I'm here with my panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Mark Bound. Today we will be answering listener emails, and our first email comes from Jose, who lives in Brownsville, Texas. And Jose asks, after catastrophic floods in Texas, Trump has avoided discussing plans to phase out FEMA. Should disaster response be federal or state-led? Mark, Scott, what do you say?
I don't know, the wisdom of Solomon here, I don't think that states can probably deal with all the things that they need to deal with, and that only the federal government has the kind of resources to to help when there are natural disasters or man-made disasters. And so, I'm going to have to suggest that we've had it right all along, and changing that is going to lead to a lot more pain for people.
Yeah, I agree with that. When we're talking about disasters, especially, let's take the hurricane from last year, which passed through my neck of the woods up here in the upstate of South Carolina and absolutely devastated toward Asheville, which is only 45 minutes away from me. Absolutely devastated that area up there, and it still is devastated. Because it crossed state lines, and most disasters don't recognize state lines. I agree with Scott. This has to stay a federal thing. This has to stay a federal agency because they're the only ones that really can effectively coordinate the state agencies that are out there dealing with this stuff. And let's remember, when it came through South Carolina, and again, we were not nearly as badly affected as up toward our friends up toward Asheville, but we lost a couple of pavilions out back, and there was trees down. I remember sitting here watching wreckers being pulled out of the subdivision with cars on them that were crushed because the trees here, our neighborhood has a lot of trees, had fallen on them. But that was here in Spartanburg County. Greenville County had it just as bad, as did Anderson County, and each county will deal with it in their own way, and that's perfectly fine. But when it is such widespread destruction and then moves across state lines, I think that's something that only a federal agency can deal with. And I think FEMA, they've dropped the ball a couple of times. Emergency management is hard. Anybody that seems to think that you snap your fingers and everything is better immediately is absolutely living in a fantasy world. The fact is, emergency management is hard. You have a number of agencies you have to deal with, different jurisdictions you have to deal with, and again, I think that putting it under a federal mandate, that helps kind of ease the way a little bit. And in all honesty, FEMA's done a pretty good job overall. I would give them a B+ since their existence. Like I say, yes, they've had a couple of shits, no doubt about it. But the fact is that they have come through, and it is a much needed service, especially since now we're cutting back at NOAA, National, the Weather Service. We're cutting back in those areas. So a lot of people don't realize the impact that's going to have on their lives. We knew about the hurricane coming through here. We knew about it about 2 days beforehand because it kept shifting patterns, and it was kind of up in the air. But we knew about it. And the fact is that once you take away the National Weather Service and you cut back into that, in the idea of saving some money, that's going to impact a lot of people, because that warning system isn't going to be there. And I think, now this is from Brownsville, Texas. I can't remember if Brownsville got impacted by the floods. But I'll tell you right now, I bet you the people of Texas, San Antonio, the places that have been impacted, really hope FEMA is going to come to their rescue.
Yeah. There's a quote that I read this morning from Tom Moser, who's the Care County Commissioner. And the quote is this: "It was probably just, I hate to say the word, priorities, trying not to raise taxes." And he was talking about the fact that the county decided against installing a $75,000 flood warning system after there was a deadly flood in 1987. So, first of all, this is clearly not, as some people have suggested, 100-year event. I mean, we've heard that Sandy was 100-year event. This is fires and Maui 100-year event. We've heard this all the time now. It seems like a new thoughts and prayers. 100-year event, 100-year event. Nobody could have seen this coming. That's all just bullshit. And here's the thing: this is this is a plan. This is a decision. It's a political decision that the Republican Party has been making since Ronald Reagan stood up and said that the federal government is the problem, not the solution to our problems. And because of that pronouncement, we have lived with disasters and avoidable occurrences for so long now, because red states in particular do not want to spend money on things that will save lives. So they've traded these lives, as over 100 now, I believe, with
Yes.
another with another perhaps as many as 150, 160 still missing, right? For $75,000, because they want to keep their taxes low. Somehow or another, we've got to get to a point in this country where we say, hey, look, if we spend our tax dollars wisely, we're okay with taxation. Just spend it well. Do not do what the government sometimes does, in corruption, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody wants fraud, abuse, and what was the other one? Waste. Nobody wants that, right? Nobody wants those things. We all got outraged at the military budget when we found out about the $400 toilet seats and $1,000 kettles and all that kind of stuff, right? Because
Absolutely.
yeah, because that was just like over the top, wasting money, and these government contracts were horrible. Um, but you're throwing a lot of babies out here with a lot of bathwater, and it's really kind of tragic that we can't get on course. And I'll say one last thing. I was working for Pitney Bowes back in 1994, I guess it was. A series of hurricanes had come through, including, I think, Wilma, and possibly even Katrina was that year. I'm not sure about the dates exactly, but there were some hurricanes, and I don't remember all their names. Um, Pitney Bowes ran a hot site for big companies that use the mail to send bills out to people. A hot site is an emergency site. Sometimes they call it business continuity. And the business continuity was in a place called Shelton, Connecticut, not far from where I live. And I was spending a lot of time because I was writing stories about it for the website. And we had clients like American Express was a client, and Discover Card was a client, and there were a whole bunch, and there was this enormous warehouse with a full print shop, like mass, is huge Xerox printers and other printers and inserters, Pitney Bowes inserters and stuff. And they kept the mail going. They even had a post office in there. Um, and they spent most of their time testing. They didn't spend most of their time actually doing the job itself, because it was simply to make sure that if something happened to Bank of America's site in North Carolina, and that site got shut down because of electricity or flooding or something like that, that they wouldn't miss out on sending out their bills, because they had this hot site and they could transfer everything right up to us, and we would print it out for them. And while I was there, it turned out that the federal government had taken it over and was using it to send out FEMA packages, because they had run out of money because of the Iraq war had gone on, and they were over budget. And so George W. Bush decided to raid FEMA's budget and pay for things that were going on in the war. And when they needed FEMA, it wasn't there for them. And they used eminent domain to take over our site, Pitney Bowes' site. And the corporate customers were outraged and angry that their tests weren't being done. Thankfully, there were no emergencies, so nobody needed it at that time. But the government, federal government, had seized our assets to use to make up for their own shortfalls. And that really does speak, I think, to this idea that, like, we're not spending money wisely. We tend to think of, like, taxation and any kind of spending is bad spending. But really what we need to do is be a lot more conscientious about it. And I think that there are two parties in America right now, and that one of those parties, the Republican Party, is penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to things like this. And they're always going to face these disasters. The states themselves are never going to have the money to help people get back on their feet again after these disasters, and that FEMA has to remain in place because only the federal government can do this, especially in those areas.
To my understanding, and I agree with you, Mark and Scott both, to my understanding, there is a satellite that shows where hurricanes are and where they're forming and what their tracking is. And that satellite has been taken offline.
We are not the only ones in the world that do this. And I think we have to remember that. Whenever you look at, like, the Weather Channel, there are all sorts of models that exist out there. So everybody seems to forget that we're the only, or think that we're the only ones that have satellites up there monitoring this stuff. Now, I will say this: if we wanted to spend money, or save money on this, we might want to do a little bit of globalization cooperation. How about we do like we do with some telescopes, where it's a combined nations come together to use telescopes to look at the stars? Why don't we do that with our weather monitoring systems, instead of just relying on a defense satellite that can be pulled, where we're sharing the burden of the cost with other nations, and everybody benefits from it. That's kind of like, I don't know, cooperation. That's being like in a community. And I think that's really one of the answers. And so many people think, and as you were saying, Brooke, well, there's the satellite was taken offline. I think the only person that hurts is us, because I cannot believe that China doesn't have its own satellite, or the Russians, or the Australians, or the French, or the British. They all have them.
They do. I mean, there's a European model that I see, and there's an American model, for instance. So I don't know who would want to cooperate with us, like on the weather, for example, which I agree we should be doing, because, of course, climate change, which they all deny is something that's real. It boggles my mind, the stupidity.
I'll get used to it. That's what.
Yeah, really.
I can't. I really can't. But I mean, it's just. I mean, the federal government, as you say, that is where the resources are. The states cannot. And I know Trump said, "Oh yeah, we're going to help Texas and this and that," and then he turns around and he says, "Well, this is not my setup." And I can't really blame Biden for it, but this is not my setup. It's his setup. And I don't even know what setup he's talking about. Does he mean the weather services? Does he mean the infrastructure? I mean, I don't even know what setup Trump was talking about, and I don't know if he does either. So first he says, well, he can't really blame Biden, but it's Biden's setup, so he actually is blaming Biden. But
FEMA's been set up a lot farther back than Biden or any of the rest of these people. So again, it's deflection.
It's ridiculous, but he has to bring that in. He has to bring that in. He has to bring Biden in.
That's because he's an. All right, that's because he's an idiot. I mean,
exactly.
So you got to just let that kind of go a little bit.
We don't, because the federal government must be the one, as you both have said, to step in and attend to this the way it always has. And
Right.
while Trump
That's what
says,
we
yes,
believe.
we're going to help them, but he doesn't want to help North Carolina. He didn't want to help whatever it was, Kentucky or someplace else, or Georgia. They wanted an extension on the aid that they got, and I think Trump said, no, you can't. You have to take care of it out of your own resources, which they don't have the money to do. And he didn't want to help California. He didn't want to help any of the blue states. And in fact, he's making it worse by taking the National Guard away from fire, wildfire support and suppression and these other jobs that they would normally be doing, and having them running around in MacArthur Park to no purpose whatsoever.
MacArthur Park, which is also melting in the dark. But Scott got that reference.
So go ahead. I'll get off.
No. I mean, here's the deal, Brooke. I understand your concern. I understand your frustration with all this. I truly do. Unfortunately, we can sit here and say, yes, the federal government should be doing this. This is what the federal government is going to be doing. Unfortunately, we are not in the position to force the federal government to do a damn thing. So we are stuck with what we've got. And
I know.
This is the issue. That's why I say, I think in a lot of ways, what is it? The serenity prayer? Things I cannot change, the things I can't change, and the wisdom to know the difference. We have to know the difference.
Oh, yeah.
We can alert people. We can say to ourselves, this is what should be happening. This is what we'd like to see. But
until in 2026 and vote to get rid of the people you don't care for, if that's what you want to do.
There you go. That's the argument.
If the elections are held, if they are certified the way the public votes. But again, as we were saying last week, whenever Miami is the test case, we're just going to cancel the election. So who knows? Anyway.
All right. So for Jose,
yes.
Sorry, we went off on a tangent
Jose,
once
I'm
again.
back at it again.
No way, Jose. Here we go. I think the general consensus is of the panel, this should be a federal program and not a state program, because I think we all kind of agree that, let's face it, the federal government, this is one thing that their ability to bring unity and coordination to it would be extremely helpful for.
So, Brooklyn, I wanted to check something that you had said about the satellite being down or the system being down, and others like that. That was something that Kristen Noem talked about the other day. But the satellites are all working. We're just not using them anymore. Or the Defense Department's not giving that information to people anymore.
Oh, okay. So it's not, when she said offline, I thought they meant that they cut the feed, like offline. I mean, to me, offline means you're offline, your internet's not working anymore. So it's working, but we the people,
right,
don't get the information. They're going to hold on to it.
A decision by the Department of Defense that NOAA is not going to be ingesting, processing, and distributing defense meteorological satellite program data to anybody else. There are 3 satellites in the DMSP system. They are the primary source of information for scientists to monitor Arctic sea ice, hurricane development, and other things. They partner with NOAA to make weather data collected from satellites publicly available. It's not clear why they're discontinuing it, but they're discontinuing it. And
they don't want to hear about climate change.
Right. My guess is that it has something to do with the flow of information and what, if Trump says, no, that wasn't a hurricane, then it's not a hurricane, or if the hurricane's going to hit Alabama, whether the data shows that or not, this is what's going to happen. And it's all very Orwellian.
Yeah, well, our weather is going to be reported by Sharpie. Right. And if they don't tell anybody at NOAA what's happening, we don't know what's going on in the satellite, and it's a Defense Department thing, then they can nuke the hurricane, and nobody will know about it. And we'll see how that goes. So hopefully we answered that.
I hope so.
So,
Well, my concern is going to be that they're going to block access to European and other satellite feed. Can they do that?
I guess they could do anything that we can't stop them from doing, as Catch-22 says. The only other nation right now with similar satellite capabilities is Japan. And scientists have actually considered switching to Japanese data, which they used to use as a backup, right now as their primary source for understanding what's going on in the climate around the world. So again, it's all very, I don't know,
Well,
disturbing, sick, whatever word you want to use. I mean,
it's loathsome.
It's not like they're saving money by taking the satellites down or not servicing them anymore or whatever. The satellites remain up there. We're just not sharing that data anymore. It seems like a really sick thing. I was wondering, I'm glad you brought it up, because I was wondering what Krista Nome was talking about.
Yeah, well, that's what it is.
Yeah, but we've answered that question. We're going to be moving on to the next.
Right? Don't look up.
The rest of us are going to get wiped out too. Anyway, I'm hoping that the Japanese, in the interests of scientific collaboration, forget about the trade, forget about everything else, will in fact share with us in the interests of the American people. Anyway, so thank you, Jose, for the question. I really hope that, I'm sure that we answered it. We went a lot further and a lot more deeply, possibly, than you were expecting. Thank you, and thank all our listeners for listening to us on the Nova Society. If you are a subscriber, thank you. We appreciate your subscribing and supporting us. If you are not a subscriber on the platform of your choice, please do subscribe. We appreciate that. Thank you very much again. Stay safe, and we'll see you all again next time on the Nova Society.
The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing partners, Apple iTunes, the largest source of podcasts and music on the internet, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your source for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. We'd also like to thank all of our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a question or comment, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So for Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershwer, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power in society is knowledge. Thanks for listening, and we will see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of NovaWorks, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description.